What just happened in Munich wasn't just a speech, it was a declaration of independence from globalist groupthink. Vice President JD Vance stood in front of Europe's elite and did something they never expected. He told the truth about their failed immigration policies, about their suppression of free speech, about their retreat from democratic values, and their reaction, total meltdown. European leaders literally squirming in their seats. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary. Vance didn't just criticize Europe's leadership, he exposed their biggest fear, that the American people are waking up to their game. And while Europe's elite are melting down over Vance's truth bombs, Americans are dealing with skyrocketing heating costs. Just like Vance isn't afraid to bring the heat in Munich, this incredible portable heater isn't afraid to keep you warm without breaking the bank. Europe's energy policies have failed their people. Don't let your heating bill fail you. Yes, I use this in my home every day while tracking global developments. Visit staywarmnow.com for 60% off and free shipping. That's staywarmnow.com. Stay warm while the globalists get burned. Okay. Now, there's a lot of reaction from JD Vance's speech in Munich. Let's listen to Secretary Marco Rubio on Face the Nation just 24 hours ago.
Why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies. The Munich Security Conference is largely a conference of democracies in which one of the things that we cherish and value is the ability to speak freely and provide your opinions. And so I think if anyone's angry about his word, they don't have to agree with him, but to be angry about it, I think actually makes his point. I thought it was actually a pretty historic speech, whether you agree with him or not. I think the valid points he's making to Europe is we are concerned that the true values that we share, the values that bind us together with Europe, are things like free speech and democracy and our shared history in winning 2 world wars and defeating Soviet communism and the like. These are the values that we shared in common. And in that Cold War, we fought against things like censorship and oppression and so forth. And when you see backsliding and you raise that, that's a very valid concern. We can't tell them how to run their countries. He simply expressed in a speech his view of it, which a lot of people, frankly, share. And I thought he said a lot of things in that speech that needed to be said. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would be upset about it. People are allowed, you don't have to agree with someone's speech. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but you don't have to agree with someone's speech to at least appreciate the fact they have a right to say it, and then you should listen to it and see whether those criticisms are valid. I assure you, the United States has come under withering criticism on many occasions from many leaders in Europe, and we don't go around throwing temper tantrums about it. Why would our allies...
Okay, we've got some clips here from that speech. Here is our first one.
With European, but while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
Oh, and they are melting down over this. Here we have, just 24 hours ago, CBS News. Hungary's Viktor Orban seized control of universities, rewrote the Constitution, and neutered the courts. Is that what you're advocating for in the U.S.? That's what the intellectualist is asking. JD Vance, I think Orban made smart decisions. Let's listen.
He sees successfully dealing with the left-wing domination of universities is Viktor Orban's approach in Hungary. I think his way has to be the model for us, not to eliminate universities, but to give the choice between survival or taking a much less biased approach to teaching. He seized control of state universities and put them in foundations that were then run by his allies. Is that what you're advocating be done in the United States?
Well, Margaret, what you're seeing in the United States actually is that universities are controlled by left-wing foundations. They're not controlled by the American taxpayer, and yet the American taxpayer is sending hundreds of billions of dollars to these universities every single year.
I don't want taxpayers controlling education necessarily. Is that what you're advocating for, federal government?
Margaret, what I'm advocating for is for taxpayers to have a say in how their money is spent. Universities are part of a social contract in this country. They educate our children. They produce important intellectual intellectual property. They get a lot of money because of it. But if they're not educating our children well and they're layering the next generation down in mountains of student debt, then they're not meeting their end of the bargain. I think it's totally reasonable to say there needs to be a political solution to that problem.
Well, America's universities still attract talent from around the world, as you've went to one of America's very top schools.
Look, there's still good things about American universities, but it's going in the wrong direction, Margaret.
But Viktor Orban in particular, as you know, I mean, he rewrote the Constitution, he neutered the courts, he has tried to control the media. These are not necessarily conservative principles. So why would you want to mimic him?
Well, look, I'm not endorsing every single thing that Viktor Orban has ever done. I don't know everything he's ever done. What I do think is that on the university principle, the idea that taxpayers should have some influence in how their money is spent at these universities, it's a totally reasonable thing. And I do think that he's made some smart decisions there that we could learn from the United States.
Well, he was just...
We could learn a lot, couldn't we? Here we have more. This is JD Vance talking with Caitlin Collins, who I saw in the White House press room shortly after Trump roasted her in the Oval Office. Let's listen to what their exchange is.
Break in.
But you can't police people for being anti-Israel or pro-Israel. You can police people for violating the law. And we have seen some of that with some of these protests.
Okay, so you agree that people who break in and vandalize a building should be prosecuted?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just checking because you did help raise money for people who did so on January 6th, which was, impeding an official proceeding, breaking into a building that they weren't allowed to be in, and vandalizing the Capitol.
Well, Caitlin, I know that this is the obsession of the national media to talk about what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago on January the 6th.
It's not an obsession. I'm just seeing if it's a double standard.
No, let me answer the question, Caitlin. I mean, look, here's been my basic argument about January the 6th. If you beat up a cop, of course, you deserve to go to prison. If you violated the law, you should suffer the consequences. But there are people who protested on January the 6th who have had the complete weight of the Justice Department thrown at them when, at worst, they're accused of misdemeanors. Now, again, there are people who are accused of worse offenses, and that's a problem. But you can't have Black Lives Matter protesters who rioted and vandalized go free when you have people who were actually peacefully protesting on January the 6th who have the book thrown at them. That's the double standard that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, I don't think there's an obsession with January 6th, but it is a legitimate question. And given what you just said there...
Of course there's an obsession with January 6th. We saw it for years.
And as Trump is getting closer to, as he's a presumptive Republican nominee, he has said he would pardon, he's considered a blanket pardon for everyone on January 6th. Are you saying that shouldn't happen? People who beat up cops should be excluded from that?
Well, I think what President Trump has said, and of course he can speak for himself, but I pay pretty close attention to what he says. And I think what the president has said is that people who have this double standard applied to them should be pardoned. And but you can't.
Should be pardoned, and that's exactly what we saw happen. Here we have more reaction. I believe this is Glenn Beck News. Reaction to JD Vance in Europe.
What did you make of the JD Vance Munich speech? Because on one hand, maybe he does have a point.
No, not Glenn Beck News. I'm sorry, GBN News. GB News.
Let's just have a look at the precise words. The threat that I worry about most. The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external factor. What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. I mean, on one hand, I think we can appreciate what he's saying. He was particularly critical of Britain, where he says that free speech has been suppressed. But equally, is it a good idea to have the deputy leader of the free world, as it's known, attacking Western allies on a global stage?
I think he was telling Western allies a few necessary home truths. I mean, the truth is that in Europe, and indeed in Britain, people are scared of voters, people are scared of free speech. The fact that political parties with significant followings were excluded from this conference, the fact that here in Britain people are being persecuted by the police for praying silently in the street, the fact that Scotland wanted to criminalise conversations around the family dinner table. I mean, this is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, our societies are built on democratic freedoms, where people are able to vote for the candidates they wish to elect, built on free speech, built on the rule of law, not lawyers. And these are under massive attack. I mean, you know, let's look at the last British Conservative government. The government was frustrated at every turn by activist civil servants, by activist judges. It lacked the guts to actually change the relevant laws, forgetting that in the end, Parliament is sovereign. And I think there are...
Okay, this guy's putting me to sleep. I don't know about you, but he's putting me to sleep over here. Okay, let's keep going. JD Vance exposes how a powerful EU official threatened Elon Musk with arrest if he platformed Trump on X. Listen to this.
Going to arrest you. The leader, I forget exactly which official it was within the European Union, but sent Elon this threatening letter that basically said, we're going to arrest you if you platform Donald Trump, who, by the way, is the likely next president of the United States. So what America should be saying is, oh, if NATO wants us to continue supporting them, and NATO wants us to continue to be a good participant in this military alliance, why don't you respect American values and respect free speech? Excuse me, it's insane that we would support a military alliance if that military alliance isn't going to be pro-free speech. I think we can do both, but we've got to say American power comes with certain strings attached. One of those is respect free speech, especially in our European allies. Like, look, I'm not going to go to some backwoods country and tell them how to live their lives, but European countries should theoretically share American values, especially about some very basic things like free speech.
And that's exactly what he told them. Let's go to a moment here. This is the actual full speech. I'll repost this right now on our X account so you can see it. Follow us on X if you haven't yet. Let's listen to a few minutes of his actual speech.
We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values, we must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. Wow. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law.
My friends, Europe has fallen. We have this also, and Wokeness posting this. This is a 60 Minutes clip, and it says, CBS, is posting an insult a crime? A German prosecutor says yes. CBS, is it a crime to post a lie? German prosecutors say yes. You know, I'm so happy that he went there to tell them to their face that what they're doing with free speech and everyone there, it's long overdue. There's a new sheriff in town, and the fallout from Munich is only just beginning. European diplomats are in full damage control mode. The media trying to desperately spin this, but they can't hide what happened. Vance didn't just deliver a speech. He exposed the deep rot at the heart of the European project. That's right. Their abandonment of free speech, their suppression of democratic values, their refusal to listen to their own people about mass migration. But here's the question nobody in the mainstream media dares to ask. If European leaders are this terrified of simple truths being spoken out loud, what else are they hiding from their own people? Drop a comment below. And you want to show that you stand for truth in a world of lies? Grab your exclusive MAG Avengers gear at shop.nextnewsnetwork.com because patriots aren't afraid to stand out.